Soviet whaling fleets killed roughly 180,000 whales that no one outside the ships ever knew about. Between 1948 and 1973, factory vessels flying the Soviet flag hunted the Southern Ocean and reported one set of numbers to the world while writing down another for themselves. The falsification was not the work of a rogue captain or a single corrupt voyage. It was systematic, sustained across 4 decades and multiple fleets, and it was driven by an economic instrument that had nothing to do with whales at all. In 1948, the Soviet Union joined the International Convention for the Regulation of Whaling, taking its seat among the nations that had agreed to limit the hunt. That same period saw the expansion of Soviet Antarctic operations around the factory ship Slava, a vessel acquired as war reparations and refitted for the ice. On paper, the USSR was now a partner in conservation, bound by the same species protections and minimum length limits as Britain, Norway, and Japan. But the ships did not answer to the convention. They answered to the state plan, and the plan was written in tonnage. That single accounting decision, measuring success in tons of product rather than numbers of animals, would end up distorting the scientific record of an entire ocean. What it produced would not be fully understood for another half-century. A 5-year plan target expressed in tonnage does not care what species fills the hold. It does not care whether the animal is legal size, whether it is pregnant, whether its population has been protected for a decade. It cares only that the number is met and then exceeded, because exceeding the plan was how officers earned bonuses, decorations, and promotion. So the fleets met the plan, and then they wrote down something else. Aboard the factory ships, biologists kept careful internal logs, species, length, sex, reproductive condition, recorded accurately for scientific use. Those logs stayed within the fleet. A second, altered set of figures traveled up through Moscow and onward to the Bureau of International Whaling Statistics in Norway, the clearinghouse that compiled the world's catch data. Species were swapped, lengths were adjusted upward past the legal minimum. Sex and pregnancy status were rewritten where the truth would have flagged a violation. The result was 2 parallel histories of the same hunt. One was true and hidden. One was false and published. For decades, every population model, every abundance estimate, every quota calculation built by the International Whaling Commission rested on the false one. Right whales had been protected worldwide since 1935. The earliest and most complete protection extended to any great whale, granted because the species had already been hunted to the edge of disappearance in the age of sail. Slow, buoyant when killed, and close to shore, they were the whale most easily taken and the whale least able to recover. Soviet fleets killed roughly 3,300 southern right whales. In some regions, the surviving population numbered only a few hundred animals. The catches were logged as other species, legal species, taken at legal lengths. Undersized whales were routinely written up at or above the minimum. Pregnant and lactating females, explicitly prohibited, were taken and recorded as neither, and much of it was waste. Because the plan credited tonnage taken rather than products sold, a large fraction of the illegal catch had little commercial use at all. Carcasses were rendered into meal or simply discarded. The animals were not killed because someone needed them. They were killed because the number needed them. The consequences of that logic would prove catastrophic on a scale that no one on those ships could see from the deck. But to understand what happened next, we need to follow the fleets to the waters off Australia. In the 1961-62 and 1962-63 seasons, the Slava and Sovetskaya Ukraina fleets took over 25,000 humpback whales in Antarctic waters. 2 seasons, 1 species. The animals belonged to the breeding stocks that migrated along the coasts of Australia and New Zealand, populations that had been hunted for generations by shore-based stations, but never at this rate. The stocks collapsed. The coastal whaling stations that depended on those migrations went bankrupt as the animals simply stopped arriving. Local operators watched a fishery that had sustained communities for decades evaporate in a matter of years, with no explanation available to them, because the cause was being written down incorrectly on ships they never saw. Southern Hemisphere humpbacks were granted protection in 1963. Soviet fleets continued taking them. Across the life of the program, Soviet catches of Southern Hemisphere humpbacks totaled roughly 48,000 animals. The reported figure was about 2,700. Every Soviet factory ship carried a whaling inspector. The convention required it. On paper, the inspection regime was functioning exactly as designed. The inspectors were employees of the whaling fleets. Their salaries, their bonuses, and their careers depended on the same plan fulfillment that drove the falsification. A man who reported an illegal catch was reporting his own employer, jeopardizing his own bonus, and marking himself as an obstacle to a target set in Moscow. The structure did not require anyone to be corrupted. It simply removed every incentive to be honest. This was not unique to the Soviet program in principle. Self-inspection was the norm across the industry in those years, and other whaling nations have been documented misreporting catches as well. But the Soviet case shows most clearly what happens when verification is entirely internal. The International Whaling Commission agreed to an international observer scheme only in 1972, placing foreign observers aboard foreign vessels. 2 decades of catch data had already been submitted, accepted, and built into the scientific baseline without a single independent check. Alfred Bertson was a Soviet cetologist who spent years aboard Pacific whaling fleets and later worked at Tinro in Vladivostok. He recorded true catch figures for decades. He also later wrote that scientists were ordered to destroy their records or to submit falsified ones in their place. Some complied. Some complied partially. Berson himself described destroying records under instruction while quietly retaining others, an act with no upside for him at the time and considerable risk. He was not alone. Dmitry Tormasov aboard the Slava and the Yuriy Dolgorukiy, Yuri Mikhaev aboard the Sovetskaya Ukraina, and others kept private copies of data they had been told did not officially exist. These men were not dissidents. They were state scientists working inside the system that was producing the fraud, and they preserved the evidence of it because they understood something the plan did not: that a false number, once entered into the scientific record, keeps doing damage long after the ships come home. They had no way of knowing whether the data would ever be usable. For most of their careers, it could not be. International observers came aboard in 1972, and the illegal catches largely stopped. They stopped in part because the observers made concealment far harder, and in part because there was much less left to catch. The Southern Hemisphere stocks that had absorbed a quarter-century of unrecorded hunting were exhausted. Plans denominated in tonnage become difficult to fulfill when the tonnage is no longer in the water. Soviet Antarctic factory whaling wound down through the following decade and ended in 1987 after the IWC moratorium on commercial whaling took effect. The ships were retired. The logs, both sets, went into archives and private apartments and desk drawers. The false figures remained the official ones. They sat inside the IWC's population models, distorting stock assessments and abundance baselines for Southern Hemisphere whales, shaping how scientists understood what these populations had once been and how far they had fallen. Researchers were building recovery estimates on a foundation that had been deliberately misaligned decades before. And then the state that had ordered the falsification ceased to exist. Beginning in 1993, Russian scientists started publishing what they had kept. Alexei Yablokov, a biologist who had become environmental advisor to President Boris Yeltsin, brought the corrected figures into the open, including in the journal Nature. Vyacheslav Zemsky, who had worked as a whaling scientist and administrator at VNIRO in Moscow, along with Mikhaev and Tormasov, published detailed reconstructions in Russian and international journals through the mid-1990s. The scale was staggering. Soviet factory ship fleets in the Southern Hemisphere had killed approximately 534,000 whales between 1948 and 1973 and reported roughly 356,000. The gap, about 180,000 animals, is a reconstruction assembled from surviving internal logs and carries real uncertainty. But it was close enough and documented enough that the International Whaling Commission accepted revised catch histories and began the work of rebuilding its baselines. Western researchers, including Robert Brownell Jr. and Philip Clapham, worked with the Russian data to integrate it into the international record. Alfred Berson died in 2004. His memoir, The Truth About Soviet Whaling, appeared in English in the journal Marine Fisheries Review in 2008, 4 years after his death. What the Soviet whaling program demonstrates is not that one nation was uniquely dishonest. It is that a measurement system once adopted becomes the thing an institution actually pursues, and that a reporting regime with no independent verification will produce whatever numbers its participants need it to produce. The whales were counted in tons, so tons were what the fleets delivered, and tons were what the records showed, and for 50 years the world's understanding of an entire ocean's populations was built on a figure that had been chosen rather than observed. The animals are still recovering. So, in its way, is the science.